Hello, we're your hosts, Sourish
and Kuan.
This is WaffleByte, where we bring you interesting bites about technology, business,
and things that might change the world.
You can find links to our articles in the description,
and you can skip to the chapters you're most interested in.
But for now, enjoy the show. Welcome to the next episode of WaffleByte. So Kuankuan, how's your first week at Imperial been?
It's been very hectic, actually. I've struggled to get around to do as many things as I'd like. My schedule's very packed, as I'm sure you'd know, and I always feel like I need to be running to the next thing that I signed myself up to. But hopefully it's rewarding, and I certainly enjoyed doing very many different things.
I went shopping at Uniqlo, and they have this really cool checkout system. It's a self-checkout system, and you essentially take all the clothes that you chose, and you put it into the checkout basket. And somehow, the checkout basket figures out what clothes you've chosen really, really quickly. So essentially, I just dumped my handful of clothes in this basket, and within like 2 seconds, it figured out everything that it needed to charge me for. I have no clue how it works, but this is super cool, and we need more of this tech in our shopping.
I do wonder, though, given that Uniqlo have many different types of, say, t-shirts, how exactly it does that, because it does feel that if you're perhaps wanting to abuse this system, you can figure out a way to buy something, or rather pay for something that's cheaper than what you actually should pay for. But clearly, if they're confident enough to use this technology, it must be accurate enough, such that any losses that it might generate because of that is outweighed by the saving in staff and other costs related to checkout.
Much better than Amazon Fresh, at least.
And the thought of this week is, will electric vehicles ever become mainstream? Our first story this week concerns OpenAI and several things that occurred this week which are noteworthy. So firstly, OpenAI completed its latest funding round as it raised $6.6 billion, which puts a value of the startup at $157 billion.
Who creates these valuations? Because they seem to just keep climbing extremely high. And I don't think that OpenAI can necessarily justify this high of a valuation.
Valuations are always very, sometimes meaningless, but they calculate it by considering the stakes that each of these investors have, and they add up the money that they injected as a percentage of the company, and that comes out as a valuation. Some investors which participated in this round, including Japanese SoftBank, in addition to Microsoft, which already is an investor in OpenAI. Now, as you mentioned, Sourish, this valuation is very high and potentially meaningless, but in this round of funding, this would put the value of OpenAI higher than the likes of Goldman Sachs, Lockheed Martin, Nike, and Starbucks. And this brings me on to a very interesting question as to, is this valuation justified? Now, on the one hand, these investors, including SoftBank and Microsoft, clearly believe in OpenAI, and they wouldn't invest if they didn't think that there was potential for OpenAI to gain a lot more in valuation. But SoftBank have also made some sketchy investments in the past, including their investment in WeWork, which amounted to billions of dollars in losses.
SoftBank might be targeting really high-risk, high-reward investments. And with those, it's expected that they might have to make billions in losses here and there to potentially make tens of billions in gains, perhaps in OpenAI.
We should note that SoftBank is itself very successful, and it is still the majority shareholder of Arm. However, given the nature of this fundraising round, a lot of smaller venture capital firms and investors were actually priced out of even investing in OpenAI. And that does suggest that demand in artificial intelligence and investing in such companies is huge. As you mentioned, the competition is actually catching up. And whilst OpenAI is the market leader at the present moment, in terms of market capitalization or valuation, number of users, and very arguably its technology, its competitors, such as Anthropic, xAI, and traditional big tech companies, have certainly been catching up. And OpenAI has asked its latest round of investors to not invest in competitors such as Anthropic and xAI.
This is very anti-competitive behavior from OpenAI, and I suspect that the American government will definitely butt in at some point soon if they continue exhibiting this behavior.
This behavior is fairly uncommon in the venture capital space because although venture capital companies need to manage relationships with the company it invests in, it rarely has any exclusive agreements with these companies. Having said that, OpenAI is such a powerful company and a company valued at over $100 billion that it clearly has a lot of negotiating power with its investors to have such a clause. However, it does seem that this exclusive arrangement will not do much in inhibiting funding for other companies because XAI and Anthropic, for example, two companies with proven generative AI models, they will not struggle to get funding. And actually, given the investor appetite in investing in artificial intelligence, they will still receive lots of investment should they choose to open funding. Finally, in a seismic shift, OpenAI has also announced that they will be foregoing their not-for-profit division. This had led to lots of senior staff leaving, and most recently this included the former Chief Technical Officer Mira Murati, former Chief Research Officer Bob McGrew, and Barrett Zoff, who was the Vice President of Research. In addition, previously we saw the likes of Ilya Sutskever also leave OpenAI, often citing the fact that there was an increased focus on profit-making ventures and not enough of a concern to the safety of any potential artificial general intelligence that may be produced by OpenAI. However, it seems that the trend is certainly towards a company which is more profit-driven and, crucially, fully under the leadership of Sam Altman, who was, if you remember, just not very long ago, ousted from OpenAI over a lack of focus on safety. But clearly things have taken a turn and OpenAI has become much more profit-driven. So we should first consider, given the exodus in staff, does talent outflow matter?
Absolutely, I think it does. And for example, we saw Dario Amodei, who was the previous vice president of research at OpenAI, leave and start Anthropic, which is of course now a competitor to OpenAI. I think one thing OpenAI had was, of course, starting early, and they still have that benefit. But another thing they had is they had a very high concentration of very, very good talent. But if they begin to lose that, and this talent leaks to bigger companies or new startups, then I think OpenAI becomes significantly weaker. And when it comes to generative AI models, a huge amount of the value that they give today is the talent for future promises of future really powerful models. So if the talent at OpenAI is weakening, then their future models will only weaken relative to the competition.
We saw earlier when Sam Altman was ousted as the CEO of OpenAI that actually the vast majority of its staff signed an open letter asking for him to return. And this shows the power of these employees, firstly, in the AI space, but also we see the likes of Google paying huge amounts of money to attract top AI talent. And I suspect that if OpenAI isn't careful, they will see more talent go to competitors, and this might seriously disadvantage them in the future, especially at the present moment that AI talent is quite scarce.
Unless, of course, OpenAI had plenty of non-compete clauses in their contracts.
Our next story is quite concerning, and it covers the Meta glasses and specifically how two Harvard students managed to hack it to make it much more dangerous and much more scary than I suspect Meta intended it to be. So we covered Meta's launch of the new Meta Ray-Ban smart glasses, which promised increased AI ability a while ago. But the Harvard students, they took it to a different level. And they used the camera in the smart glasses to take pictures of people, which would happen as you are walking down the street, and search their pictures for any matching images online. And any relevant information was then retrieved and passed through a large language model. So this large language model was designed to be able to harvest as much information as possible based on the picture that they took of people on the street. And actually there was a demonstration showing the student walking up to a complete stranger and addressing them by their name, providing detail about them from just a picture. I think it's important to note, though, that this could have been done in the past because you could still take images and search the web. But technology like the Meta Ray-Ban smart glasses, they make this significantly more accessible, and that's the key issue. Now, for me, this raises several concerns, which includes the importance of good cybersecurity, because any leaked passwords and emails and any personal details that come with that may well be associated with you. So, this could be if it was part of a leak that included your email and you had your email on another web page with your picture. So, such tools could therefore be used to try and hack into your accounts, which means that things like 2FA and good security practices are very important. Now, they were always very important, but I think this highlights that moving forward, this will be especially important. And it also shows that people need to be mindful of what they put online. And as I'm sure we all know, what is online stays online. And even if you posted something, perhaps when you were younger, and didn't think of the consequences back then, it might come back to haunt you later in your life. So it's crucial that people do not provide personal information to public domains online, and people think before they post, which I don't think people do very much, especially people who are younger and perhaps might be under the influence of substances, let's say.
I'm really glad this demonstration exists because every time some new technology comes out by a big tech company, we always talk about the potential privacy concerns and the potential issues that could occur. But to finally see some issues actually happen in a real life demonstration, that serves as a cautionary tale to us and the public that these devices can really cause major issues in our day to day lives. And so hopefully, if this news becomes widespread, people can be more careful with the products they buy.
That's a very good point that you make. And for me, the lack of awareness of such tools to obtain information, which, as I mentioned before, you could still take an image of people and search online to find information about them. But most people are not aware of the powers that, especially recently, large language models and the abilities of web scraping bots have brought to the table, that any information that they've ever posted online can be easily retrieved. And I don't think people are aware of that and are comfortable with that. So I think it's important that people become more aware through demonstrations like this that their social media profiles, for example, or anything they've posted online under even perhaps unique usernames to only certain websites will be retrievable, and they need to have a much greater focus on what they post online.
Private things aren't necessarily really private because if, for example, you have a private Instagram account with 300 followers, all it takes is for one of those followers to have a dodgy Chrome extension, and boom, all of your images on your private Instagram account are now leaked and potentially accessible to these web scrapers and therefore anyone with these glasses.
Finally, I think that we need more legislation against such malicious activity because certainly in the EU, for example, there was an AI regulation that mainly focused on the companies which made the AI themselves, which I don't think is focusing on the right point, because we need to make sure that AI cannot be used in a harmful manner, and the best way of doing that is punishing those who do illegal activities and commit crimes using AI. And I think that needs to be a focus for lawmakers, and that needs to be severely punished, because it's not very helpful punishing companies which make AI, and some would argue, in fact, that it stifles innovation, whereas those who take advantage of AI to abuse systems, they are the people who need to be punished. And this shows that people can easily abuse AI systems to, for example, dox people.
I have a Rabbit R1 coming in a couple of days, and if someone hacks that device whilst I have it on my shelf right above my bed or right behind my computer, then I'm absolutely screwed. So yes, we do need better legislation, and we need better cybersecurity divisions in all companies.
X, which was formerly known as Twitter and was bought by Elon Musk for $44 billion, is now apparently worth only $9.4 billion as per Fidelity, which is a very large asset manager. This would mean that X had lost 78% of its value since Elon Musk took over it, which does seem like a terrible investment for Elon Musk, but also for his partners, which helped him finance this deal.
Elon has clearly made some incredible investments in the past couple of decades, but X certainly isn't one of them.
X took on a very large amount of debt as part of this transaction and has failed to increase revenues. In fact, some advertisers had walked away from the platform, citing the frequent controversies that Elon Musk gets himself into and some of his opinions, which most would probably disagree with. However, as you mentioned, this is seeming like a terrible investment for Elon Musk, but he claims he has a vision for X to be the everything app of the West. Now, personally, this seems increasingly unlikely and it was doomed to fail to begin with.
Maybe Elon decided to buy X for a different reason. For example, if he's really passionate about free speech and that type of thing, maybe he just loves to own X and have some sort of control over a big social media platform.
Without going into politics, I think some independent studies have shown that Elon Musk hasn't really lived up to his claim that he's increasing freedom of speech on the platform because he has still complied with government takedown requests and, in fact, has complied to more government takedown requests, which suggesting that he is essentially not standing up to what he would call government censorship, except in some high-profile cases such as the one in Brazil. And in fact, I believe he is now being forced to pay even more fines in Brazil for failing to comply with local regulations.
On the topic of the Everything app, I'm yet to see much everything put into this app. The most we've seen is job boards and stuff like that, and maybe a newsletter here and there, but X still is a one-purpose app, and I don't see that changing anytime soon.
I agree, and I think this is ingrained in Western culture and the usage patterns of people in Western countries, because we have such established platforms such as Instagram for social media, such as PayPal or Google Wallet or Apple Wallet for payments, and Outlook and Gmail for emails, that it's just not feasible for everything to be combined. Whereas in China, where only WeChat was ever allowed by the government to get big, this proves to be a more fertile ground for everything apps.
Walter Isaacson, in his biography of Elon Musk, suggested that Elon decided to buy X not out of any of the reasons he's publicly stated, but because he wanted a new adventure, something exciting and almost like a playground for him to mess around with. And we see similar behavior in other successful startup founders, people who've exited for millions or even billions, then getting really bored with life and then going on to start up more startups.
I guess this is something you can just do when you top the Forbes billionaire list for many years and have a net worth of over $200 billion. Our final story is about Epic Games, who once again find themselves in the courtroom, this time against Samsung and Google. Now, Epic Games, which makes the very popular game Fortnite, has filed an antitrust lawsuit against Samsung and Google. Epic Games claims that Google and Samsung inhibit users from downloading third-party app stores, including Epic Games' own app store, by turning auto blocker on by default on Samsung's latest devices. Now, this is a system which essentially warns the user of the dangers for downloading apps from external app stores, and Epic Games suggested that over 50% of users who try to install their app end up giving up because the process of turning this auto blocker off is too onerous. Reportedly, this requires 21 steps, which Epic Games argues effectively makes Google Play the only option as an app store on Android devices. Google, meanwhile, suggests that users are free to turn off auto blocker and install external apps.
Google's argument is a little weak here because, as we've seen with, for example, Amazon's revolutionary one-click buy system, consumers really love convenience. So if it really does take 21 steps to turn off Google's auto blocker on Samsung devices, then I see Epic Games' point here because very few people are going to actually do that. And whilst I do appreciate that having the choice and the option to customize and modify things further is good, if very few people are going to do that, then is there much point in having that choice to begin with, at least from a company's perspective?
It's very clear to me that Google's incentives here are very much not in favor of allowing people to download third-party app stores, because Google makes a lot of money from Google Play, both from advertisements and from taking a cut of microtransactions that people make through its app store. And so it's quite clear that without regulatory scrutiny, Google would be delighted to keep inhibiting, or rather making it more difficult for people to download third-party app stores. And I think that this is a situation where we need government regulation to intervene and to make sure that there isn't so-called market failure in the mobile app store business on Android devices.
Conspiracy theories are usually full of waffle, founded on the smallest kernel of truth and stretched out to the bounds of imagination. But ever so often, one strikes the jackpot and seems to be true. Today, I want to take a look at one of these golden nuggets and explore whether or not we're moving to a future run by bots. This is Dead Internet Theory. The origins of the theory are difficult to trace, but it's considered to have spawned in 2019 on, of course, 4chan. There are two core arguments being made. The first is that the internet is entirely full of bots, that most influencers and commenters are bots, AI generated and just overall fake. The second claim is that governments and state-backed actors are behind this, as opposed to individuals or companies. Let's tackle that first point.
So all of a sudden AI is everywhere.
AI tools have completely revolutionized the content creation.
Tools like this will
game.
be used for powerful misinformation. There are bad
AI
actors
is literally
that will...
destroying society.
I think if this technology goes wrong, it can go quite wrong.
With the rise of AI models which can interpret and generate natural language, speech, videos, and deepfakes, it's necessary to question if what we see online was made by a human. Because dead internet theory is technically possible. We have the capabilities today for it to be true. But the theory claims that from around 2016 to 2017 is when it came into full force. But perhaps this was an idea ahead of its time, so we should really evaluate what we see today, here and now. Numerous studies conclude that over 50% of traffic on X is driven by bots, and despite Musk's claims, this figure seems to have increased since he took over the platform.
Whilst, from personal experience, bots are rampant on X, I suspect that the methodology in collecting this data may be slightly skewed because it might not distinguish, for example, bots scraping the platform X and looking at posts that are being posted, as opposed to like people actually posting and engaging with communities. So I'm not sure how they reach these figures, but certainly I think that bots are a problem, certainly on
Very
X.
skeptical of all of these studies that try and quantify the amount of bots on a platform. I think it's very difficult to do, and it only gets more difficult over time as bots become better and better. We also see a rise in AI-generated video content, and the amount of times I go to YouTube to search for an answer to a technical question and simply just end up with a video automatically generated from some Stack Overflow thread is immense. A statistic which went viral said that in 2022, 47.4% of all internet traffic was bots. Now, it's important to note that bots can be very useful, and are typically used for tasks such as web crawling or monitoring. But estimates suggest that this figure could exceed 99% by the end of the decade, much of which would be bad bots. And this estimate comes from the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies. Many stats have also come out suggesting that a third of traffic to websites are bots looking for exploits. I used to manage a couple of my own servers, and there was traffic being thrown at them constantly by script kiddies across the world attempting to break in. It was extremely annoying. But I think this line of argument is a little weak, because this traffic doesn't actually do anything to directly affect the experience of the average internet user. These bots don't write tweets or create YouTube videos. And I mean, can generative AI really even be the root cause of this? Sure, Gen AI is crucial in mass generating content, but can't we just go to trusted sources instead? Can't we just subscribe to our favorite human YouTubers, TikTokers, journalists, and bloggers?
I think the internet was terminally ill before ChatGPT was announced and released. I think the biggest watershed moment when you look at this sort of theory of the decaying internet is the release of algorithmic feeds. I think that algorithmic ranking systems that are AI-driven really set the stage for just endless worthless pieces of content and sort of just the whole internet to be optimized in the most absurd ways.
Algorithmic feeds. When you visit youtube.com or scroll on the infinite vertical video feeds, you don't see content just from your favorite humans. You see content that the algorithm thinks will increase engagement and bring more money to the company behind the platform. And as with any rule-based environment, you can game the system. Generative AI can make content which interests users at scale, but many humans already post clickbait and other useless content used to drive interactions. AI simply cranks it up a notch.
I find it immensely annoying where you have completely junk videos of, sometimes it's an AI voice, sometimes it's actually a human voice, but these videos are just complete clickbait and very useless junk. And it's often a sentence of useful information padded with 8 minutes of waffle to make an 8-minute YouTube video. And it really annoys me. And I've certainly noticed that since the advent of generative AI, this has gone up a notch and it increasingly populates my feed, specifically in areas such as popular culture, where demand for content is so high and content available is so low that people often resort to watching this type of content.
And so we think of social media as first contact between humanity and AI, because social media is kind of a baby AI, right? It was the biggest supercomputer deployed probably en masse to touch human beings for 8 hours a day or whatever, pointed at your kid's brain, right? It's a supercomputer AI pointed at your brain. What does the supercomputer, what does the AI do? It's just calculating one thing, which is, can I make a prediction about which of the next tweets I could show you or videos I could show you would be most likely to keep you in that infinite scroll loop. And it's so good at that it's checkmate against your self-control, like prediction of like, I think I have something else to do, that it keeps people in there for quite a long time. And in that first contact with humanity, we say, like, how did this go? Like between, we always say like, oh, what's going to happen when humanity develops AI? It's like, well, we saw a version of what happened, which is that humanity lost because we got a more doom scrolling, shortened attention span, social validation. We birthed a whole new career field called social media influencer, which is now colonized like half of.
Iza Raskin, the inventor of the infinite scroll, thinks that generative AI isn't our real problem here. If you see some random video of a grandma blowing the candles on a cake for their 92nd birthday, and your grandma happens to be 92 too, you're going to mindlessly like the video and move on. And you weren't focused enough to notice the details that clearly indicated this video was AI generated. And this account will post the same grandma video for every age between 70 and 100, and boom, just like that, it's gamed the algorithm without a human ever touching a camera to begin with. Coming back to the original question, is dead internet theory's first argument right? I think, as with all conspiracy theories, it takes a step too far. But unlike most conspiracy theories, it's built off a very strong foundation of truth and offers a glimpse into the near future. To understand what they really mean, though, we need to look back to the earlier days of the web. It was a place full of IRC chat forums and email conversations, a place where people across the world could communicate and talk to each other.
In the early 90s, the web is slow and hard to navigate. It's the domain of academics and computer geeks.
We ended up sort of in the middle of the night starting this project. What we were trying to do was put sort of a human face on the internet.
True to its namesake, the browser is a navigator to the web, making surfing as easy as point and click.
All of a sudden, the power of the internet that had been there for years was available to everybody in an easy way, point and click, the universal language.
The essence of the early internet was to engage with other humans online and stay updated. But that internet doesn't exist anymore. It's dead.
More governments are kicking people off the internet than ever before.
It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens.
Book burnings in Nazi Germany. All instances of those in positions of authority attempting to suppress access to knowledge and dissenting opinion. And the practice continues to this day, both in the open and covertly.
The government maintains tight control on what people inside the country can and can't see, making the World Wide Web not so wide.
Now, I think the second strand of dead internet theory is much weaker. I don't think governments are behind all of the bots we see online. Because whilst governments ultimately have control over these companies, it's immensely difficult to secretly take significant actions. And for example, nations such as China, North Korea, and Russia show us what it'd look like if a government controlled the internet. But that's certainly not what we see in the West, so it probably isn't happening over here. The internet democratizes everything, meaning it's challenging for all digital content to be politically fueled by the government.
They hide behind Twitter hashtags, Facebook ads, and fake news stories. They're the work of bots and trolls.
However, this doesn't stop one entity, such as the Kremlin, from flooding the internet with their own bots.
And one of the most skilled countries at deploying them is Russia.
And there's not a whole lot we can do to stop bots. We also aren't even very good at deciding whether an account or piece of media is AI generated or not. So we really are screwed unless something groundbreaking happens soon. Dead internet theory is a conspiracy with an uncanny semblance to real life, and it suggests that we may need to relegate the internet to a secondary tool in society. In a time where we cannot even trust video calls, the World Wide Web will soon stop being the place to meet new people and learn about the world and explore. For now, the best thing we can do is to be very careful of what we see and hear, but it's not long before even that's not enough. The brightest minds will have to come together and think very hard for a very long time if we are to find a solution to this pressing problem. This was Dead Internet Theory, and it's almost real.
Our thought for this episode was, will electric vehicles ever become mainstream? This is something I've been thinking about because Northvolt, which is Europe's biggest battery maker and has shareholders including Volkswagen, Goldman Sachs and BMW, has been under increasing pressure to deliver. Recently, it has struggled with competition from China, which continues to be the leader in the electric vehicle race and produces significantly cheaper batteries thanks to its supply chain dominance and a basic monopoly over certain raw materials. In addition, quite strangely and unfortunately, since the start of 2024, 3 employees have been found mysteriously dead after coming back from a shift at work at Northvolt factories. And this has caused significant scrutiny on the company, given the suspicious nature of the deaths. Furthermore, in June, BMW announced it would cancel a $2.2 billion contract with the company. And more recently, after it suffered significant losses, it announced it had made 1,600 jobs redundant. On a broader scale, companies such as Mercedes-Benz, Porsche, Hyundai, and most recently Volvo, who had previously pledged to fully switch over to battery-powered electric vehicles, have backtracked on their plans to transition and have instead continued to produce hybrid and internal combustion engine-powered cars. This is as many people in the Western world still remain skeptical towards electric vehicles, particularly in the United States, citing the high price and the lack of fast public charging facilities as the main reasons.
The issue with public charging facilities is that it's not an open source initiative and it's also not centralized. And this is one of the jobs that I think the government should have taken on earlier in the process. And only recently are we seeing companies such as Tesla open up their network to other companies. But we still then have a monopoly owned by one company as opposed to, for example, the government. So I think unless we get the charging situation completely sorted out, we will basically forever struggle to get chargers placed absolutely everywhere, fast chargers placed absolutely everywhere. And until we have fast chargers placed everywhere, I don't think we're going to have a 100% adoption of EVs.
You mentioned one of the 2 concerns that I talked about, which is charging. And I think it's certainly the case that the electric vehicle makers don't have enough of an incentive to provide good charging facilities, because once you've bought the vehicle, it's no longer their problem. And similarly, fast charging requires so much investment, so much maintenance, and it's just not very profitable that we don't see private companies coming into market to compete. Certainly in places like China, where there's huge electric vehicle adoption, fast charging facilities are often broken, they're often very expensive, and so the experience is just not very nice. But I'd like to talk about the cost a bit more, because in the United States at least, and in the European Union, we see government officials putting huge tariffs on Chinese electric cars. Now, whilst in my view, the quality of Chinese electric cars can be improved, it is without...
I actually visited a BYD store in Sunday and looked at the cars, and I thought they obviously weren't premium cars, but they weren't bad either. I don't think even someone enthusiastic about cars would be too unhappy with the quality of them.
But to the US consumer and to the EU consumer, paying over $50,000 or euros for an electric car is probably not an option, and a internal combustion engine powered equivalent can be bought for so much cheaper. Whilst it offers a variety of benefits, it is simply not an option for a lot of people. And given, as we mentioned, the struggles with locally producing the materials required for electric vehicles, I just don't ever see that prices will become so low that it will not become a factor in people deciding whether to choose an electric vehicle or an internal combustion vehicle. And I think that's quite sad and quite a big hurdle in the transition towards electric-powered vehicles.
The issue is that internal combustion engine cars have almost had like an 80-year head start over their EV counterparts, at least in the mass market sector. And so it's going to take us quite a while until we see EVs that can be produced for cheap, and crucially, EVs that are then on the second-hand market for cheap. And I think we still need multiple, or in fact many, technological and scientific breakthroughs before that becomes the case, as battery degradation is a huge issue, and that almost renders second-hand EVs kind of useless. And so once we fix the battery issue, then I think EVs will skyrocket in popularity both on the first and second-hand markets. And whenever we go on a long road trip, whether that be a trip to Heathrow Airport or maybe a trip to Belgium, we always prioritize taking the Tesla, because the Tesla just offers a much smoother ride, both for the passenger and the driver. And because Tesla have a pretty good fast charging network, we've never really actually had any issues, because there are always fast Tesla chargers in all of the locations you'd expect. For example, on the ferry port, we can just arrive 20 minutes earlier, quickly juice up the Tesla whilst we go shopping or eat lunch. But I imagine that if you own an EV from another brand, especially in the UK and possibly in Europe, you're going to struggle a ton. And that does make electric vehicles very unappealing, unless you absolutely want a Tesla.
What's another issue is that often fast chargers by private companies seek to capitalize on the situation where you don't have much choice in going to a different fast charger, and so they can charge you a premium for the electricity that they provide you. And this often means that you're actually not saving money on longer trips, such as road trips or trips on the motorway to an airport, compared to a gasoline-powered car. And I think that's another issue that people who do a lot of distance in cars will have with EVs.
So I think it's important to note that the vast majority of the population usually have much shorter journeys, and those journeys usually commute to work. And we see a rise in workplaces integrating free EV charging on their parking lots.
Yes, actually, my dad was considering leasing an electric vehicle just to take advantage of free charging. But in the end, given the hybrid work, he decided against that.
The future of transport clearly lies in public transport, where we have really efficient and, more importantly, reliable systems to get people around. But when we've built up a world that relies on cars and large roads, especially in America, we have to find some sort of transition between today's combustion vehicles and tomorrow's public transport systems. And I think EVs offer an excellent bridge between these two worlds.
Thank you for listening. We'll be back next Monday with a new episode.
And remember to follow us on X at the WaffleByte. That's the_WaffleByte. See you there.